1274th day of the war. Donald Trump stated that Ukraine will not return Crimea and will not enter NATO. But this is not the main news, because in fact such a position was always taken by the previous American administration. From the really important to the serious, talks continue about the participation of the United States in afterwar security guarantees, at least aviation, which is already a very serious progress. And also, it seems the US is sure that Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky. Even Budapest is already preparing for this. The most fascinating part is that Russia is trying to clarify that it did not agree to this, but Trump does not listen to them, and the American administration continues to insist that Putin agreed to the meeting and it will pass very soon. In Russia and Ukraine, refineries are on. The difference is that Russia is also throwing live quarters around the oil infrastructure with deadly cassettes of ammunition, breaking international law. At the same time, serious problems with gasoline began in Russia. It ran out, as in some regions inside the country, as in occupied Crimea. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drone operators caught another composition with fuel in over 30 kilometers from the front line on Zaporizhzhia. The result looks epic even from the satellite, and from drones this firework looks quite monstrous. Under Pokrovsk, Ukrainians continue to eliminate the Russian breakthroughs. It is reported that the Ukrainian defense forces have already cut off the Kucherov Yar, and the Russian military has fled into the forest. In addition to another fake flag picking in the south of Donetsk region, Russian armed forces cannot boast, but this is not a reason to relax. Putin is doing everything he can to show on negotiations that he has trump cards. Till now, however, it seems only possible to go in the direction of a Russian military unit. Meanwhile, Russian military continue to suffer indifference since the beginning of the command, and then from officials making payments for their injuries. In the rear, the war has become a food base for the most monstrous moral monsters. In the Moscow region, a farmstead was held on a chain, forcing a contract to be signed, and children of a young age are taught to be cannon fodder, and by methods that even Russian supporters of Putin don't like. Fathers complain that in a camp in Belgorod region, their children are washed, shot with rubber bullets, and through with sound grenades. All this and more in today's fresh update. You can support it with your like, comment, and subscription to the channel. All these actions help promote the video, especially your subscriptions. They are important for YouTube algorithms. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button. The main quote from yesterday for some reason was Trump's statement that Ukraine will not enter NATO and will not return Crimea. As it often happens, I don't understand where journalists saw some news because first of all, it's about current US administration positions, and secondly, the position of President Biden was basically the same. It just didn't make sense to say a word. So let's not torture this moment any longer and move on to the really important things. Washington insiders from Axios report that during a call on Monday, Trump told Putin that he would directly like to meet with Zelensky to discuss his territorial demands. Trump asked Putin to be realistic. Be realistic, haha, ironic channel author Bitely. Remember how before the second Istanbul, Trump asked Putin to write in the memorandum about the world something realistic so that it could be signed, and that Putin ultimately threw it out? Yeah. Let's remember, he threw out a repeat of the Istanbul capitulation with the compulsion to transfer 4 regions to Russia. In addition, according to Axios, during the meeting with Trump, Zelensky said that the territorial matters should be discussed only between him and Putin. According to the Ukrainian source, Trump agreed with this. Also, the publication reports that the working group on the development of Ukraine's security guarantees is headed by Marco Rubio. U.S. defense forces can be involved to ensure this. The problem is that judging by the previous round of talks, the decisive coalitions from the U.S. expect not as much aviation as logistics and air defense, and here the American military will have to step on Ukraine's territory, which the U.S. administration clearly promised not to allow. The fact that Rubio leads the group is a good sign. I remind you, in the background of the degenerate administration, this is how Trump gathered in the White House. Rubio looks adequate. Not quite adequate in general because of the tactics 2 personnel a flyer, but again in the background of the others. It's not without reason that he's taking 4 positions at once in Trump's administration. Also, the New York Times and the AFP reported that during the call with Trump, Putin suggested holding a meeting with Zelensky in Moscow. 2-way or 3-way, it is not clear. Trump refused and Zelensky too. Vitally reports back to both outlets. The New York Times, during the call they discussed the possibility of a 2-way meeting, Putin and Zelensky, which would include 3-way meetings with Trump. Putin suggested Moscow as the place to hold the meeting, just like he suggested Trump at the Anchorage meeting. Europeans were scared by such scenarios, but Trump confidently refused Putin, said the European diplomat. The FAPS said Putin suggested holding a meeting with Zelensky in Moscow. 2 sources. Putin mentioned Moscow during the call with Trump, said one of them, and added Zelensky in the answer no. Well, the main thing is for Trump not to think too much about it, Bitely notes. If he refuses, good, and it seems to me many have not understood what happened. I will explain to you now. If you remember my theory, it is that Trump lies to both sides in the hope that, as it were, they will not be able to refuse and do what he did to the second side. If you don't remember, look at yesterday's video. There I will describe the American strategy, fake it till you make it. Some get it like Edison, some don't like Elizabeth Holmes. So this whole Putin-Zelensky meeting is an incredible divorce from Trump. Here's the thing, in my opinion. Putin can't refuse Trump directly because he's afraid of the pressure from the US, because at the Alaska summit, Trump said it was the last Chinese warning. And when Trump said about the meeting with Zelensky, Putin joked, saying, well, let's do it in Moscow. Trump either didn't understand that it was a joke or understood but deliberately pretend to not understand, and decided that it was an agreement to a direct meeting of Zelensky and Putin. And now the entire American administration says that Putin agreed to the meeting. Moreover, the meeting is already being prepared in Budapest, and Putin cannot leave yet because everything is, first of all, rapid, and secondly, he has run out of limit on rewriting it to Trump. So he's in a position where he didn't agree to the meeting, but it really can happen. That's the international clownage. In conclusion, I believe the meeting will rather be a yes than a no. Putin has two bad elections. The first one does as Trump says, risking his goals. The second one doesn't do as Trump says in going after lupus. Thus, he risks getting real sanctions from the US that will strike the economy, which is also waiting for a large-scale crisis this fall, according to Russian economists. What a circus the international policy has turned into, of course. However, it has always been the case, so I still hate it. Well, in the conclusion of the episode of the unseen sluggishness from the American president, after the conversation with Putin, Trump called Orban about the membership of Ukraine in the EU, reports Bloomberg. According to sources of the agency, Trump on Monday discussed with the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, his blockade of negotiations on the entry of Ukraine into the European Union. The initiative came from the European leaders gathered in the White House together with Zelensky, who asked the American president to influence Orban. The call to the Ukrainian Prime Minister's consulate in Hungary was not confirmed, and later Orban made it clear on Facebook that he is not going to change his position, saying that joining Ukraine in the EU does not give security guarantees. On the call, the Hungarian side also expressed their readiness to consider the opportunity to hold a new round of negotiations of Putin and Zelensky in Budapest, writes Bloomberg. In fact, nothing surprising, given how many times Budapest agreed to European package sanctions against Russia. It has been long clear that Orban has no friends, only interests and his own, which are to preserve his own corruption regime, for which he is trying to play in anti-Ukrainian moods. Since no Trump will save him from a possible strike at the elections, but Orban is a scumbag, he was always bowed to when needed. Remember how Turkey was against the entry into NATO, Sweden, Finland, well, about the same story. Orban just wants to get rid of some bad guys. But that scumbag, who used to be a clear-cut EVing politician who represents young people in the request for the European country's future, is a total scumbag. And I hope the next elections will already end with this problem because, well, what they can be. Another example of Trump's strategy of pushing ideas in and out is Western troops located in Ukraine. The US president is actively pretending that Putin agreed to place European contingent in Ukraine, which is not true. Again, let's assume it was true. Trump said, well, you understand there have to be some guarantees for Ukraine. Putin said, yes, I get it. And that's it. After that, Trump said, Putin agreed to provide security guarantees for Ukraine as a European contingent. Putin didn't say anything like that. It's necessary to add right away that this is completely untruthful, and Russia has been actively refusing this over official speakers lately. But Trump does not care. He keeps telling Europeans and Ukrainians that the matter is decided. There are no obstacles for the European forces to be placed in Ukraine. The details of such a contingent have become known, and Bloomberg reports about 10 countries ready to send military forces to Ukraine as part of a peaceful settlement, according to Bloomberg, citing its own sources, including the sending of British and French troops, including the number of forces and the personnel's location, which was discussed at a recent meeting of European representatives. According to the agency, at the first stage, as a guarantee of security for Ukraine, help is planned for Ukrainian soldiers in training and strengthening, although it is not clear who is supposed to teach someone here. It is assumed that a multinational group, mostly made up of European forces, will be sent there. They will be located far from the front line. The UK and France, as reported, are ready to allocate hundreds of their soldiers, although hundreds isn't a big deal, of course. The second stage provides so-called US support, which includes data exchange, surveillance abroad, supplying weapons, and possibly air defense resources. So again, whether Trump will manage to do all this or not is an open question. He says that Russia is significantly deteriorating and trying to avoid any pressure from the US. And since Vladimir Putin didn't make any concessions over the past 6 months, things are hard for him now. If he were smarter, he would have given Trump something periodically over the past 6 months to keep it as long as possible. But in the end, he brought the situation to a point where Trump openly said, I'll leave everything to Russia to figure it out, and if nothing happens, then screw it. But in the end, he was forced to cancel the summit in Alaska, and now he can't keep Trump any longer. He, of course, is trying to get somewhere, but it doesn't go so well. We'll see, and we'll see what happens if Zelensky meets with Putin. So again, Trump's plan is for Zelensky and Putin to sit down and not want to do anything while he presses on them, pushing one another and pushing them to sign something. And in favor of it being possible, they say just one thing, that this discontent with everyone and everyone else at this table has a completely different plan. For example, Vladimir Putin's plan is to transfer responsibility to Zelensky and deprive Ukraine of American support, and at the same time continue to fight. Zelensky's plan is the opposite, trying to convince Trump that Vladimir Putin has a problem and that the US should start pressing on Russia and supporting Ukraine. The European plan is for Trump to realize himself that Vladimir Putin is not agreed with, that he has a problem, and that he should start pressing on Russia. So you see, those sitting behind that table have their own complete goals. None of them are connected with what Trump is doing. The goal of Trump is to close this question as much as possible with any of your viewers, no matter what their name is. And therefore, based on the fact that everyone does not like it means, but at the same time everyone is forced to take into account the opinion of Trump, from this something in the theory can come out. I would give this, well, a percent of, well, 20 to the maximum, maybe 25% from the head just to show my approximate attitude. Nevertheless, we see how all this impacts already now. For example, you can pay attention to the fact that Russian attacks on Ukraine became less in number. That is, it is launched by 100 UAVs, not by 500. This is still a quite serious attack that kills civilized people. Russia continues to shoot with missiles and so on. Nevertheless, it is obvious that Putin is afraid to scare Trump very much, so he is slightly reducing the intensity of Ukraine's shelling. Here, so yes, this influence is there. We will see what it will lead to in the end. In general, it will work or not, we will see. But it is necessary to understand and remember that everything in fact is decided on the battlefield and around it, so it is very important to monitor this too. In the area of Takmek in the occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region, the Russian railway competition with the firepower for Russian armed forces was hit. This was reported by the former advisor of the mayor of Mariupol, Petr Andrushenko. There is no more Russian railway report through the temporarily occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region, he wrote. The video of the attack was published by the unit Ronin of the Battalion of Unmanned Systems of the 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade. Fires clarified that instead of the attack, the city of Malachansk. The geolocation was confirmed by the channel In Factum. Military analyst Yen Matviv notes the feature of the composition of military time. There is an empty platform forward. If broken down, it will destroy and the locomotive will remain target. Right after the locomotive, the platform with the military, which should cover it from drones. Next, many empty cars and only then fuel cisterns. As we can see, not one of these prerequisites helped. The picture of the consequences from a close distance was published by the Telegram channel /SHBion. The post also stated that as a result of the attack there are wounded, their number is clarified. The consequences of the channel Dnipro Osengorbuz published a fresh satellite image instead of events. Even in low resolution, the burning train looks very epic, more such frames. I will also note from you that to cover the moving train in over 30 kilometers from the front line is an extremely non-trivial task even in modern times. So we congratulate the soldiers and wish them further success in eliminating Russian military logistics. Well, before we move on, I would like to remind you that you can support the video not only with your like, comments, and subscription to the channel, but also with the financial channel itself. You can do this on Patreon, the link to which is in the description. You choose the level of support, you get the appropriate bonuses, well, you support the channel. I plan to do more for patrons in this month, but as you can see, the events are not very good, so it did not work out. I don't know, I feel like I held back all the patrons. I really want to do something for them. I have several plans for this topic, but I completely lack the strength and time, but I will try very hard. And this is what I'm talking about, that if you subscribe to some unique and exclusive content, then probably this is not the right strategy because, as you can see, it is not yet possible to implement it. If you subscribe to support the channels of the exit of new videos, consider my work important and useful, then super, then there are no problems, then everything is as planned. You can also support the channel by buying NVPN. This is a tool to bypass blockages that allow you to bypass blockages. You can watch YouTube at normal speed, use Twitter, Instagram, call WhatsApp and Telegram, use Discord, go to blocked resources. Unfortunately, every time this number becomes more and more because Russia is blocking more and more. An NVPN is a VPN that I do with the team. We have a cool support service that is ready to help even those who have never heard about VPN. You just have to put it there for relatives. They will call for support, hand it over, and they will help you with everything. And everything is reliable, it works without failures. Roskomnadzor is trying really hard to fool us, but they are not. We can bypass that. And if there are any problems, the support service is here as it is. So buy NVPN, the link is in the description. Well, so far in Russia, it is still legal to buy VPNs and use them. It is still not forbidden by the law, and we are moving on. In Volgograd, as a result of the drone attack on the night of August 19, a fire occurred on the territory of the local refinery. In one of the buildings of the city hospital 16, on the roof of which the debris of UAVs fell, said Governor Andriy Bakharov. In the morning, the fire was managed to eliminate. There are no victims. According to the Refinery report, more than 3 hours after the attack, the reception and departure of aircraft from the Volgograd airport was suspended. This is the second attack on the refinery, which was headed by Volgograd Oil Refinery over the past week. Earlier, it suffered a fire on August 14. The Astro publication wrote then that the refinery was suspended. According to Reuters, the refinery stopped working this time as well. The Ukrainian company against Russian oil, which I've told you about in detail in a recent video, is bringing its fruits. Russia lost more than 13% of its power due to strikes by Ukrainian drones in the Moscow Times. The drone strikes at Russian oil factories, which intensified in August and caused the stop of no less than 4 major oil companies, lost the economy by 7% of its oil processing capacity, according to the Moscow Times. On August 2, after the UAV strike, the Novokhybershevsk refinery Rosneft stopped at 83 million tons per year. On November 11, it halted the supply to the Saratov refinery, a company whose capacity is 5.8 million tons per year. On November 15, it became known about the situation of the Volgograd refinery Lukoilo, the largest in southern Russia with a capacity of 14.8 million tons per year. The same day after the drone attack, the oil reception stopped for processing of the Samara refinery Rosneft with a capacity of 8.5 million tons per year. In addition, on August 2, about half of the capacity, about 6.9 million tons from 13.8, was stopped by the refinery in Ryazan, the largest of the refineries in Russia, the fuel from which is going on sale, including in the Moscow region. Thus, a little less than 3 weeks ago, Nefteanik lost 44.3 million tons of annual capacity of the refinery, 13.5% of the total indicator by country, which is 328 million tons per year, according to the estimates of Vostok Capital. Last year, according to Reuters, Russian refineries refilled 267 million tons of oil, the minimal volume for the past 12 years. The repair of the Rosneft refineries in Ryazan and Novokhybersk will take about a month, the familiar situation of the Reuters sources said. At least until the end of August, according to them, the Samarsk refinery will also stop working. I told you earlier that due to the Ukrainian campaign against the fuel infrastructure, Russia began to fight back with gasoline. Now it is officially confirmed, for example, the Gauleite of occupied Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov. In Crimea, occupied Russia, there was a break with gasoline on refineries due to the SVO. This was reported by the head of the annexed republic, Sergei Aksyonov. According to him, the problems first appeared since the I-95. A significant part of the fuel is delivered by car transport. At the end of the special military operation, a number of questions will go away, and all this will return to the same level. We believe that our situation will level out due to the invasion by large, vertically integrated companies, said Aksyonov. It is assumed that the problem with fuel can last for a month or even longer. But even in Russia, the situation is similar. Huge lines have taken to the refineries of the Perm Krai. Local journalists write that there is catastrophically not enough fuel for everyone. Residents of the Spassky district are especially concerned. Well, probably for how long will it take? Everyone is waiting for gasoline. Apparently there is no gasoline at all. It's being very tough. Yes, there is no gasoline. The old gasoline from the refinery is used up and the gasoline engine has only just come up. That's how we live. According to Telegram channels from the neighboring Khabarovsk region, they began carrying a canister with gasoline from Khabarovsk residents. In the company NK, in turn, they transferred gasoline trucks to a circular operation to solve problems. Searchers from the project Cyber Borish found reports of a recent successful Ukrainian attack in Crimea, where likely another Russian RLS by the simple Mirador was destroyed. Here is what the analysts wrote: the attack on the former position of the air defense in the area of the settlement of Khutorok and the Yevpatory district, the temporarily occupied Crimea, occurred on the period of August 6 through 11. As a result of the attack, supposedly drones were hit by the expensive RLS CUSDA-2E2. This is indicated by a number of factors. The station was at this position until the very strike. After the attack, the fire nearby was recorded. The object is a covered net of the same size and type, corresponding to the above-mentioned RLS. According to our data, this station has ceased to record after the strike. This is another successful operation to demilitarize the Crimea territory and reduce the possibility of an occupation army, they write. We return again and again to the catastrophe on the Russian gunpowder plant, because, as it often happens, it has inflated the problems of military time. The explosion at the elastic plant in the Ryazan region probably occurred due to a violation of security equipment. According to the Zaporizhzhia Novosti, one of the employees produced work using a welding machine or a grinder near a gunpowder plant. After the explosion, 24 people died. Total number of victims increased to 157. According to Zaporizhzhia Novosti, the explosion at the gunpowder workshop at the elastic plant occurred on August 15, 10:41 a.m. According to the source, a fissure was formed at the scene of the explosion, about 40 meters in size. From the explosion wave, a neighboring building gathered and the fire hit other buildings. Immediately after the explosion, employees of the neighboring workshops ran into the forest, but still injured due to repeated explosions. The workshop was including responsible for the production of shells with a caliber of 52. The employees of the Ministry of Emergency Situations are still analyzing the rubble, while the number of dead may increase. In the hospitals, workers remain in serious condition. The mobilization economy is not just when the line for the production of shells is going up. It is always compromises with the reduction of costs on the social sphere, with the giving of my own future fundraising funds and loans to neglected security equipment. Sooner or later, you will have to pay for such loans with your life. In the London Silver Town, there is an unnoticed memorial for the employees of the Brinermont factory, which died in the explosion on January 17, 1917. Mid the missile crisis of 1915, the factory under the order of the British Military Office deployed production of rotten fruit, despite protests by the company's own person. The production was not equipped to contact explosive substances and was located in a residential area. As a result of the explosion, 18 workers died, as well as 55 local residents. Hundreds were injured. The report of the reasons for the incident was classified only in the 1950s. This memorial is a monument to neglected human lives in the name of imperial ambitions, and the explosion in the Ryazan region in which time showed us that, at least in Russia, history teaches only those who do not teach anything. To kill people in Ukraine, Russia is ready to put hundreds of thousands of lives on the altar, a monstrous crime not only against the Ukrainian people but also against itself. The Russian campaign against Ukrainian infrastructure has rather a reacting nature lately. Analysts after Russian strikes on Ukrainian railway stations in response to a series of Ukrainian raids on Russian railway infrastructure. This is what happened yesterday, when Russian armed forces struck oil and gas facilities in the Poltava region. There are reports of strikes and debris falling in the Kremenchuk and Rubens regions. Administrative buildings and enterprises in the energy sector are damaged, and 1,471 residents and 119 legal opponents remain in the Rubens region without electricity, said local head Vladimir Kogut. According to the preliminary information, there are no victims. As Union notes, Kremenchuk was hit by one of the most massive attacks since the beginning of the full-scale war with the use of UAVs, flyers, and ballistic missiles. According to the version of the Z channels, the Kremenchuk refinery was hit. The Ministry of Energy of Ukraine confirmed the hit on the oil processing infrastructure. At the same time, several dozen drones attacked one of the production objects of the Ukraine gas transport system. Previously, ground infrastructure damage was recorded, according to the ministry. It is likely to include the gas compressor station in Lubnaya and the fire system of NASA firms. The Russian Ministry of Defense called this attack a group strike with high-precision weapons of great range, as well as with strike UAVs with oil production facility supplying a fire group of Ukrainian armed forces in Donbass. It would seem that the attack has occurred in a completely symmetrical Ukrainian strike over the past weeks, but the Russian army would not be the Russian army if it did not add a direct military crime to this strike. The mayor of Kremenchuk warned that after the night attack on the territory of the city, there are not broken cassettes of ammunition, and confirmed this with a photo. He's urging local residents to be extremely careful and not to get close to them. Here, even the question isn't in the formal designation of a war crime. Moreover, I share the point of view that in an illegitimate, aggressive war, there are no legitimate goals, and that any strike of Russia to any military or non-wearized object is criminal, and in fact, every person involved in this strike must take responsibility. The thing is, Russia faces the unforeseen danger of life of civilians. Moreover, as Ukrainian experience showed, you can be out of order for a long time without all sorts of cassettes of ammunition, which first of all stand out for being non-vegetarian and secondly leave a bunch of unbreakable ammunition left behind, dangerously for children, because some of us never took any interesting iron in our childhood. And now, thanks to the Russian army, such games can become deadly for the residents of Kremlin and other cities in Ukraine. This is what Ukrainian reality looks like. It looks like this because Russia was not stopped yet in Syria, where the Russian army did the absolutely the same. I hope that the world community will stop stopping Putin at least now. By the way, again, I don't look at all my displeasure for Trump when he says that Obama gave Russia and Crimea and that it was a monstrous catastrophe. I agree with him. Well, that is, he said it always, that there was practically no international reaction to the annexation of Crimea. That is, it was very, very reserved. Well, this is monstrous. This led to the fact that Russian aggression became widespread, not to mention even the war of 2008 in Georgia. On the Pokrovsk direction, Deep State notes the Russians' advance in the area of Muravka near the border of Dnipropetrovsk region, which is still unavailable to the Russians, at least in this sector. Meanwhile, defense forces continue to clean the territory occupied by Russian forces during the so-called breakthrough on the Dobropoli. Assistant researcher Playa Fra reported, citing his own source, that Ukrainian forces have taken the Russians out of Kucherievia, although they are still hiding in the forest southeast of the village. This researcher you can remember from the very alarming trend about the Russian breakthrough, so he will almost certainly not increase Ukrainian successes. On his map, it is seen that the Russian armed forces still preserve control over the southern part of the formed pit, about 7.5 kilometers in depth. So far, not all the consequences of the Russian operation are eliminated, although it is already possible to clearly note that the catastrophe at the front was managed to prevent, at least this time. Well, the Russian soldiers running through the forests haven't run for long. They still have a chance to save their lives and give way. Ukrainian defense forces continue to hold the last settlements left under their control in the south of the Donetsk region. In Donetsk, Ukrainian forces did not allow the occupiers who infiltrated the village of Alexandrorad to secure themselves, according to the publication Militarny. The 141st Separate Mechanized Brigade reported that the Russians sent a group to the settlement, which was to show the Russian flag raising by drone camera. A Ukrainian assault group operating under the coordination of reconnaissance drones was sent to shoot the occupiers. The enemy, covering with infantry meat, infiltrated the settlement and hurried to hanging his tricolor, but the next day the forces were destroyed, the military reported. Unfortunately, one of the participants of the operation, therapist, died after the fight in the village. He raised the Ukrainian flag in the village after the occupation of the occupiers, but died while retreating 150 meters from the evacuation point, when he incidentally turned from the route. The village of Alexandrorad is located on the administrative border of Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. This episode, by the way, demonstrates that the Russian-Ukrainian war has long been incorrect to call positional. If a year or two ago the Russians really had to assault the tight-fledged Ukrainian positions in the village, then now there are no such carefully defended positions, including because they would become a light target for Russian drones. Instead of this, a clash of small maneuvered groups is taking place behind settlements where no one is equipped with constant positions, hiding in houses at most. Of course, this is how the war looks far from everywhere, but still, the nature of the combat actions is moving towards a small maneuver, which even the historical analogues do not quite fit. At the same time, it should be noted that in addition to the fake flag picking, the successes in this direction also have the Russians. Deep State notes the advance of Russian armed forces in the area of Timirovka and Olgavka at the junction of Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia regions. What goals are pursued by Russian armed forces in the northeast of the Zaporizhzhia region is not quite clear. Another advance for the sake of advance without a goal for any logistical routes or industrial centers. The Okogoro resource sublights the statistics of the advance of Russian armed forces over the past week, from 11 to 17 August. During this period, according to Deep State, the Russian troops occupied 76 square kilometers of Ukraine's territory, that is, about 11 square kilometers per day. Let me remind you, over the previous week, the Russians advanced at a rate of about 21 kilometers per day. For another 3 weeks before that, 14 square kilometers per day. It turns out that the breakthrough of Russian armed forces a week ago, if it can be called that at all, became more of an exception. However, about the stable slowdown in the Russian offensive pace, lower than the level of May and July, also says it is too early. We need to wait another at least week, and we are waiting. As for the number of combat clashes on the front, according to the General Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces, the third week holds at least 150 per day, even down to 1%, leaving about 140 per day. And this is already quite a serious indicator of the Russian offensives dying down. We will watch the trends. The third largest attack still happens in the Pokrovsk direction, where the indicator has even increased by 17%, leaving 358 attacks in a week or more than 50 per day. On the other hand, in the Sumy region, the number of attacks dropped by 38% up to 55% in a week or about 8% per day, as well as in the Zelensky region, which indirectly confirms that the Russian command has buried the offensive plans for Sumy and transferring parts of it to other sections of the front. For 3.5 years of the full-scale war in Ukraine, the garrison wars of Russia carried out at least 18,341 charges for desertion and the leave of the service site, according to the Analytics Center headed by Kirill Porobits. Figures of these cases were 18,407 people. On the basis of data from their own investigation, as well as data on the desertion and leakages seen, the authors of the report came to the conclusion that on average, the criminal case is made up of 1 desertion out of 3, and therefore the total number of desertion may be higher than 3 times. We assume that the total number of desertions achieves 60,000 people, which is almost 10% of the total size of the Russian forces in the combat zone. In fact, of course, there are even more desertions, just many do not get into the official system of justice and experience the informal system of punishment up to zeroing itself in the Russian army. The numbers are comparable to the Russian irreversible losses, but it is necessary to remember that in the Russian legal practice, desertions are usually not condemned to prison time, but returned part-time to the front, where they are most often used in meat assaults. So if you decided to desert, do not go to the Russian justice and how to desert correctly, reducing your risks, tells the children of the forest. Contact them if you do not want to die for the interests of the path. Now a regular rubric worked material about the fate of veterans of the SVO on the civilian. The name was not came up by me, so the one who served his Russian military called his relative. Another former serviceman, Alexander Dubovoy, 92 years of birth, who served in the 114th Separate Rifle Brigade of the military unit 42038, scrapped the indecency in the unit that he could no longer get the appropriate payments for a long time. On October 23, 1924, he suffered a frontal explosive wound, causing closed shrapnel injury, brain shake, and short-term vision loss. Later, he was dismissed for being unwell and began achieving the payments he was supposed to. He has still received no payments for gas and ministry payments. According to Alexander, he is refusing page 98, and a misrepresentation has been made in the publication. In particular, the date of his evacuation is misrepresented. Because of this, he is deprived of all supposed payments and benefits. In addition, the former military officer noted that the unit is clashing with indifference. The command openly says that the fate of the personnel is indistinguishable to them, as well as that the subordinates subordinated to the commanders are beaten to death. In this unit, there is indifference, boldness, and humiliation of soldiers from the side of the elderly under the call. They can humiliate us, beat us, say that they care about our condition, that's all. So, in general, it could be described as much as any Russian unit, even before the war. Now, the situation has deteriorated to the point where all that remains is to repeat the appeal of not going to the Russian army, or else you'll be like an axe to it, and that's not a problem. The war opens up new opportunities for the most different scumbags and scumbags, up to the modern fishermen. In Moscow region, 3 members of one family from the village of Kormko were detained on suspicion of theft and illegal deprivation of work freedom, according to 42-year-old Nade. They fooled him, jailed him, and forced him to sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense to get payments, reports the press service of the prosecutor's office. According to preliminary data, Nade worked on a farm, getting only food and cigarettes instead of the promised pay. At some point, he stole 30 ov from the workers, ran away, and sell them soon. He decided to return, after which he was shackled by the chain and threatened to be fed with wine. He was able to escape for the second time, but 2 weeks later he was found, again captured, beaten, taken to a neighboring village, and made to the camera to claim agreement to sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense, supposedly as a bribe. On June 26, Gennady ran away once again and turned to the police. The investigation presented 3 suspects of accusation of theft of a person and illegal deprivation of freedom. The children are not left behind. Residents of Belgrade region complained about the shooting with rubber bullets under the children of the military patriotic camp. In the comments under the post of Governor Vyacheslav Vladikov, the resident of the Lora region reported that on August 12 she sent her child to the army camp, Armat. However, on August 15 she was forced to take him due to the behavior of the instructors. Underfoot, the instructor threw a training grenade or sound grenade, I don't understand, just so suddenly from the back. The son of another boy was deafened and a strong headache began. He, the instructor, laughing and left. Yesterday, during the missile danger, children shot from the airsoft with rubber bullets to run faster. Every day, communication was on internet. If a boy was told to shoot something, if he couldn't pull it out of his pocket, he was told to put a grenade somewhere. I'm ashamed to write, but it's not shameful for them to tell the children, said the woman. Another man in the comments confirmed Lori's words. My brother, he wrote, was also in this period in the army but decided to stay silent about these facts so as not to put anyone in danger. He asked to check the instructor's rights to work with children, as well as evaluate the psychological state of the person who dropped grenades under the participants. The man noted that his brother's father died in the war with Ukraine and that he has awards, but apparently he means his inalienable brother, because if his inalienable brother died, it means your father died too. Anyway, let's not get into family problems with these people. There are a lot of questions to the instructors. They break the reputations of the army and patriotic upbringing in general with their bad example. If so brave that they can shoot children and throw grenades on the leg, then let them sign up for professional troops to protect our territories and interests, show themselves and show their skills in the field, wrote Kirill. Minister of Youth and Youth Affairs of the Belgrade region, Tatiana Kuryeva, promised to check on the results, which have not yet been reported. But I can tell you about the results of this check before it is carried out. The check, nothing is found, children have thought it out, and so on. The basis of the story, children are more triggered. You know why? Not within the framework of this war, no. There is just a separate category of people who either initially remained in Russia or returned to Russia after leaving it. At the same time, I am not talking about those who do not have a financial opportunity to leave Russia or who have sick relatives who need to move and so on. No, about those people who have the opportunity and this is their type of choice. And when you communicate with them, they say, yes, everything is normal with us, you increase everything there, everything is good, everything is fine, we do not blow anything into the mouth, everything is wonderful, and so on. and maybe I would believe them, but how can you give everything to your children? Okay, maybe you are not giving it to such a military camp, but you are giving a child to a children's garden, where lessons on important things were taught to him. Literally in the children's garden, the children's gardeners will tell which Putin is the great president and how Ukrainians should be killed. I am not talking about the school Moshe. There is already this regular practice, just their children are beaten to the head by the rhetoric of hatred. Their children are beaten to the head by loyalty together instead of critical thinking and so on. There come military pedophiles, killers, and tell how cool it is they killed Ukrainians. How is this possible? Well, that is, as much as possible, looking at it, knowing about it, sending your child to that very school, sitting and saying, yes, it's normal, we will increase everything. I do not know. But I don't care so much about these very people, but it's their choice in the end. How many children? This will in any case make an unwavering impression on their entire life, or maybe it will turn into cynical and hypocrite scumbags like their parents. Well, at least those who do this and such, yes, I don't see evil, everything is normal. This does not work that way. But in any case, be careful, distance your children from your family and loved ones from any mobilized Russian organizations, whether it's about a children's camp, about the army, or something else. Your life, the life of your children is in your hands, and the state will not take care of you in any way. He needs meat, he needs people ready to die for him, or rather, not for the state itself, but for Vladimir Putin himself and his interests. Michael Nacke was with you, and see you soon. All the best. Bye.